Hello, Phoneybeetlemaniacxs here, and we're once again, and my old friend Raoul's at it again. He's decided to hitch his wagon next to David Fitzgerald's particular band. Anyway, we'll know whether that gets him. So anyway, let's do with his new video. It's gonna be amazing.
This is going to be the beginning of a series discussing the book Kneeled by David Fitzgerald. One of my friends on YouTube, Bunto Skiffler, suggested that I present this in a way like in a courtroom where I present the different pieces of evidence and formulate a conclusion and argument from that. I don't know if I have the sophistication to do that.
Well, then already you failed, because we're not in a courtroom, we're in a academic arena. And you can't present things as you do in an academic arena as you do in a courtroom. That's why the atheist or theist who says that presenting evidence has to be done as done in a courtroom fails. Because it's not based upon what evidence you know, but by the scholarly processes we do process those evidences by. Again, you cannot say that it has to be processed a certain way. You have to do the methodology as provided to you by the academic field you're following.
I think somebody like Eric Zusi, who wrote Christ Ventriloquist, Paul, who was an investigative reporter, could do something like that quite nicely. In fact, in his book, I read the book, and he did overkill to prove a point. However, what I will do is read certain excerpts from the book and extrapolate other pieces of information, perhaps from other readings or from empirical evidence, observations all around us. And I'll try to make it quite interesting that way. Before I discuss what I'm...
Have you noticed one thing he didn't say where he said investigative report? He didn't say historian or biblical scholar. There's a reason he didn't say that, because no biblical historian or scholar holds to this idea of Jesus mysticism. There's a reason for that. It's stupid.
I want to talk about today, the spread of Christianity, how Christianity changed the world overnight. Yeah. I want to talk about an equally piece of bullshit that occurred last night. The Nye-Ham debate. The debate that was going to change the world. I think over 1 million people watched it. And churches were all tuned to it. And they did a poll afterwards, according to Mr. Tweej, T-W-E-E-J. There was a poll taken of 6,444 people polled. And according to them, Ham, the creationist, got 9% of the votes. He won. Obviously all from the church. Nye, on the other hand, got 91% of the votes. I've often said that I claim to the Dawkins view as far as creationists. You don't debate them. You don't give them any oxygen. You don't enable them. You don't give them any kind of credibility. By debating them, you're basically saying they have some kind of verifiable argument that you want to squash or something. They have nothing. The more we learn about science, the more they have nothing. And last night's debate was no different. I didn't watch the whole debate. I wasn't going to, because there's, quite frankly, there's enough stuff on TV more interesting. We taped a couple shows. Being Human, about a vampire coexisting with a werewolf, much more interesting. And The Following, which is about a cult, sort of like Christianity. That's much more interesting. But just to give you an example why I don't debate creationists, I don't debate fundies at all anymore.
Well, there's a couple of things for me to get my teeth into. The website that he's talked about is actually a Christian website. Yeah, it's a Christian website. It's a Christian newsletter. I'll post the website down below for you. Second thing is that Bill and I wanted to address him because some people who hold to this point of view have influence in government and influence over different ideas in government, and he's tried to combat it that way. He did it for the right reasons. I say that we shouldn't debate them. Well, why shouldn't you convert an idea you think is incorrect? Thirdly, let's get on to what you just said. I don't even know where to start with this. No, you don't debate anybody, Raoul. You won't debate me. You won't debate Jake Turkey Cat. You won't debate Rectisgate. You won't debate anybody because you'll know you'll lose. Because you don't understand anything when it comes to anything. You know little when it comes to the Bible. You know little when it comes to anything at all. And when we've pointed these things out to you, and I've pointed these things out to you many times, I think is Raoul, is that I'm willing to admit that I could be wrong. That I can be wrong. I have been wrong in the past. Okay? About many things. Okay? But so far, your argument against me has included accusations that I committed logical fallacies that I didn't commit. That I was somehow intellectually inferior to you based upon nothing. So where's the debate there? And Jay Turkey Cat, who is undisclosed, pointed the same things out to you. Now we did a hangout in which she went over exactly what we talked about. In which she went over exactly what I said, and she agreed with me. And in paying to agree with me, I actually told her to be critical of me. And the reason I did that, Raoul, is that I wanted to double check with somebody who wasn't me that I hadn't committed the logical fallacies you accused me of. Because unlike you, I believe in intellectual honesty.
This is in chapter 10 of David Fitzgerald's book, Nailed. It's actually the last myth. I'm going to go there. And he says that the traditional view of Christianity spread starts with Jesus shaking up the entire Judean region with his teachings and miracles, and the faith just snowballing down from the hill of Golgotha where he was crucified, as his disciples and Paul convert hundreds at a time, find numerous churches throughout the Mediterranean, until miracle by miracle and martyr by martyr, the entire Roman Empire and then the entire Western world becomes Christian. Bullshit. I'm sorry, I had something in my mouth. But this image of a faith, as he goes on to say, is unstoppable juggernaut, is nothing more than the invention of one 4th century branch of Christianity, which I would call, as Bart Ehrman calls it, the proto-orthodoxy, or today the fundies.
Oh boy, the fundamentalist movement, as we understand it now, didn't exist until the 18th century, Raoul. The proto-orthodoxy is the Orthodox Christian Church, which people still belong to today. Is one of the oldest branches of Christianity in the world. It is part of Eastern Christianity. And when they said that it spread, it did spread. David Fitzgerald's incredulity about that does not make it untrue. We know certain churches that certain places they were in, and it wasn't just in Jerusalem. Well, I'm sure we're going to get to that fallacy in a minute.
They made it up. After over 3 centuries of bitter fighting, a single faction emerges as the one true faith. And they wasted no time, as all victors do in history, of rewriting history, to portray themselves as the true Orthodox, who kept a firm hold on dogma. And spin doctors like Luke play down the bitter fights between Paul and Peter, John, and others to try to make it look like they were all in accord together. And really, Christianity was nothing more than another Johnny-come-lately heretical spin-off.
Luke wrote the Gospels. Paul wasn't in them. Paul's letters, Paul wasn't in them. He met later, when he became a Christian, he was a Jew. And as Christianity is a quote-unquote spin-off, yes, a spin-off of Judaism. Everybody knows this. It's not controversial, Raoul.
Fitzgerald goes on to say, today, thanks in part to discoveries like the Dag Hamani manuscripts, we know that the real growth of Christianity was nothing like the tidy, rosy pictures that writers like Luke and Eusebius, whose who's a liar. I mean, we pointed that out before. Uh, Portrayed it to be.
Okay, how does this Daikomari manuscript lead to population numbers or census numbers or religious affiliations? Because I'm pretty sure, and I'm willing to put my ass on the line here, it doesn't deal with any of those things. Right? We don't know how many people counted themselves as Christian because they were persecuted.
Christianity did not conquer the known world like a juggernaut. Its various factions lingered on throughout its length of time, coming together only slowly and piecemeal with great difficulty, barely hanging on for centuries. And even by their own account, Christians languished as a fringe cult for centuries, a loose gathering of tiny bickering groups rejected or opposed by society.
That's not true, but again, well, we don't expect you to know historical fact now. Now, there are several Christian by the beginning of the first century, like for example, in places like Syria, Turkey, Antioch, you might have heard of it, in places like, for example, Carthage, in Corinth, in Galatia, in Rome itself, places like that, not just in Jerusalem. And they were not just a fringe group of small people, they were quite a large group. So Fitzgerald, as usual, is wrong!
In the Bible itself, as Fitzgerald notes, Acts 1:15 claims there were only about 120 believers after the death of this Jesus. But asserts that after a few miracles, it had gone up to 3,000 and finally 5,000 before Stephen was martyred. And then they all scattered. But Richard Carrier, the great historian, summarizes this fallacy. He says, Richard Carrier, as Fitzgerald's quoting him, he says, all we get is a general impression of winning converts here and there, and whenever anything more precise is said, we really hear more than several households per town.
Yeah, Richard Carrier, historian. He's much of a historian as I am a woman. He's not a historian. He's a pseudo-historian. He's got the calling back into it, but because he holds to these stupid, really stupid ideas, that's the reason he's not a historian. He doesn't hold a post. He doesn't hold any sort of like valid position in academia. He just doesn't. And citing him as a source just shows you where that gets you. Now, to refute his point, prove to me that it was only in a few households. You've said the Book of Acts is not true because it's got miraculous events in it. You said that to me, Raoul. Also, Raoul, the thing is that it was talking about the church in Jerusalem. It was not talking about the spread of Christianity as a whole. You know, there's more to Palestine than Jerusalem. There's Nazareth, for God's sake. There's Bethlehem. There's a load of cities that make up what we consider Palestine at the time.
Even at our most optimistic level, it doesn't look good. We could perhaps imagine 100 Christians per city by the year 100. Now, this is out of an estimated population of 2.5 million of first century Palestine. Even by the most optimistic estimates, Christians had then penetrated fewer than 70 towns or cities across the whole.
There are no facts that back this up. That is just a blanket assertion. Whether my assertion that again Christianity is spread to all these other places, we don't know how many Christians were in these places, but we do know there were churches there and must have a mass population that makes up a church. So bravo, Raoul, you fail logic again.
All of Europe, it only makes about 7,000 people, and that's microscopic. I had done a research once a while back, and I actually researched Christian text and sources on the internet and all. By the end of the first century, only 0.6% of the populace were Christian. That's it, less than 1%. So much for turning the world upside down. By the 4th century, a few centuries later, after Constantine codified the religion, and by the way, he was not a Christian, he was a sun worshipper. He was an opportunist. He wanted to make the society much more stable. There were all kinds of civil wars going on. He tried to solidify everybody, and he saw Christianity as a tool. And the people that joined the Christian cult also used it as a tool. By the fourth century, when he codified it, we're talking about less than 30% of the populace being Christians.
Well, do you have any sort of data to back that up? It's just a simple ask. Do you have any data that backs up that blanket assertion, which isn't true, by the way? Because by the end of the 1st century, it spread to a lot of places, like, for example, Greece, for example. It spread to most of Jordan and most of the known world by then. That's the reason that Constantine adopted it, because he was growing so fast and he couldn't compete anymore. And he saw the fact he was growing and decided, you know what, could you find that new religion that we're currently seeing that's growing up in our local people, because it was growing up in the poor, among the poor and the weary. Sometimes, Raoul, you're a moron.
That's hardly turning the world upside down. And Fitzgerald went on to say, what's more, this mount, the 7,000 the carrier talked about, includes all first century groups, including Gnostics and other heretics considered by the Orthodoxy to not be Christians, and also. And it doesn't include the people that actually left the faith. He says, we know that Pliny the Younger.
It's Pliny the Younger. And he's going to go ahead and misquote Pliny the Younger now, so let's enjoy this.
Letter to Trajan, a significant number of Christians became dissatisfied and left the faith on their own without even being persecuted. And they were quick to jump ship when they were threatened with some kind of persecution or prosecution, as Candida Moss says. This letter, Pliny the Younger, to the Emperor Trajan, was written around 111. It proves how unknown Christians were to most people, even in the early 2nd century. And yet Pliny fully admits he has no experience with Christians. In fact, he knows nothing about how they are to be punished or charged with any crimes. Carrier went on to explain this problem. Carrier says, this is proof positive that Christians must have been extremely scarce.
So, as usual, Raoul gets things wrong, and so does Richard Carrier. So let's read the actual letters of Pliny the Younger. I'm going to read the entire thing of Pliny the Younger to the Emperor Trajan. So here we go. Here we go. It is my practice, my lord, to refer to you all matters concerning which I am in doubt. For who better give my guidance to my hesitation or inform my ignorance? I have never participated in trials of Christians. I therefore do not know what offence it is to it is the practice to publish or investigate and to what it says. I have been not a little hesitant as to what should be distinction on account of age or difference between the very young and the very mature, what power is to be granted for recompense, or if a man has once been a Christian, it does him no good to have ceased or to be one, whether the name itself, even without offence, and all the offences associated with the name are to be punished. So, Raoul, no. He's basically asking, what's your idea about these Christians? Is it illegal to be one, blah, blah, blah. He's basically asking for clarification. It does nothing about the Pacific, but we'll continue to see if he talks about it. Now, the other cases of those who were denounced to me as Christians, I have said the following procedure. I interrogated these as to whether they were Christians. Those who confessed I interrogated a second and third time, threatened them with punishment, and those who persisted I ordered executed. For I had no doubt that within their nature of their creed, stubbornness or inflexibility, obstinacy, surely deserved to be punished. There were others possessed by the same folly, but because they were, I sent others for them to be transferred to Rome. This seems to be defeating your point. That there were citizens in Rome. This seems to be proving the opposite. But let's continue. You might start getting better. So soon, accusations spread, as usually happens, because of procedures going on and several incidents occurring. An anonymous document was published containing the names of many people. Those who denied that they were or had been Christians were then, when they invoked the gods in words directly to me, offered prayers with incense and wine to your image, which I had brought to be for this purpose, together with the statues of the gods, and moreover cursed Christ. None of those who are really Christian is said to be forced to do these. I thought it should be discharged. Others, named by the informant, declared that they were Christians, but they denied it, assuming that they had been or had ceased to be some years before. Others many years, such as 25 years. The almost images and the statues of God and cursed Christ. They asserted, however, that the sum and substance of their fault or error had been that they were accustomed to meet on a fixed day before dawn and sing responsive hymn to Christ as a god, and to bind themselves by oath not to some crime, but not to commit fraud, theft, adultery, not to falsify the truth, nor to refuse to refer to truth when called upon to do so. When this was over, it was their custom to depart and to assemble again to partake food, but ordinary and instant food. Even this third they have ceased to do after my edict, by which, in accordance of your discussion, I have forbidden political associations. According, I just all the more necessary to find out the truth by torturing two female slaves who called deaconesses. But I discovered nothing else but depraved and excessive superstition. I therefore postponed the investigation and hastened to consult about you, for the matter seemed to me to warrant consulting you, especially because of the numbers involved. Which means it's probably involved a lot of people. For many people of every age, every rank, also of status, and will be endangered, for the contagion of this superstition has not only spread to the cities, but also to villages and farms. But it seems possible to check and cure it. It is certainly quite clear that the temples which have been deserted have begun to be frigid, that the established religious rites long neglected are being resumed, and that for everywhere sacrificial animals are come in, for which now very few purchases can be found. Hence it is easy to imagine what the multitude can be found if an opportunity for recompense is afforded. So, Roll, he's a liar. Boom! It does say it just be spread to places like Rome. So therefore, Carrier is full of shit.
Almost to the point of social invisibility. Pliny had been governor of Asia Minor for over a year already, before learning he even had Christians in his province. And before that he held the post of consul, the highest possible office in the entire Roman Empire, short of actually being emperor. He had been a lawyer in the Roman courts for several dictates, and goes on to say all about his different credentials. And he didn't know anything about, he didn't even know why being a Christian was illegal. He had to ask about it. Therefore, Christians must have been extremely rare. Keith Hopkins, another scholar, surveys the evidence and scholarship on early Christian populations, and warns that no one can make any definite claims on the subject, at least for the first 2 centuries.
And you see, in the same video, he refutes himself. You said it was 6 to 10%, and it was less than 1% of the population. And then in the exact same sentence, exact same video, sorry, you say that we can't make any definite claims. You cannot get so self-pointing than this.
Robin Lane Fox's own research agrees with Hopkins' findings. He knows that Christian writers use words like all or everywhere quite freely, and they were exaggerating when they said all and everywhere, meaning maybe a local area, and they would call it everywhere. Christians were scarcely, according to pagan histories and texts and papyrus, Christians were scarcely to be found before 250 A.D. The 2 fullest histories written in the early 3rd century make no mention of them whatsoever.
This is an argument from silence and doesn't work because we've got evidences of these churches actually existing. You lose. Sorry, you're wrong. It's wrong. You're wrong. You know, I want the Dr. Cox clip on hydrocation because I can just use it throughout this bloody video.
And they even supported these people, these non-Christians, by early church father Origen. Origen, who admitted in the mid-3rd century that Christians were only a tiny fraction of the population.
And David Fitzgerald and Richard Carey are wrong again, because I can actually cite you the entire chapter they're talking about. So says then, as if not asserting, observing that he was anything inconsistent with the words he just used, if all were to do as to save you, as you surely do not say that if Romans were in compliance with your wishes to neglect the customary duties to God's son men, and were to worship the Most High, or whatever you wish to call him, then he will come down and fight for them. So they need no other help than his. For this same God of yours says, promised of all this, and much more this who served him, and see in what way he has helped them and you. They, in place of being the masters to hold the world, as left with not so much of the passive ground at home, and as for you, if any of you transgress even in secret, he is sought out and punished with death. As the question stated is, what would happen if the Romans were persuaded to adopt the principles of Christians to despise the duties paid to recognise the gods and to men, and to worship the Most High? This is my answer to that question. We say that if two of us shall agree on earth as touching anything that we shall ask, it should be done for them of the Father of the just, which is in heaven. For God rejoiced in the agreement of rational beings and turned away from discord. And what we are to expect if you agree as present, but the whole of the Roman Emperor, for the whole of the Empire of Rome. For they will practice to the word, and who old say to the Hebrews that when they were pursued by Egyptians, the Lord shall fight for you, and ye shall hold their peace. And if they unite in prayer with one accord, they will to put flight far more for enemies than those who were discomfited by prayer of Moses when he cried to the Lord, and for those who prayed with him. Now, if what God promised to those who keep his laws has not come to pass, the reason of its non-fulfillment is not to ascribe to the unfaithfulness of God, but he made the fulfillment of his promise to depend on certain conditions, namely that they should be adroit and live too close to his laws, and if the Jews bear not a plot of ground nor a habitation left to them, according to them, receive the conditional promise that the entire blame laid upon the crimes, and especially not the guilt treatment of Jesus. Yeah, that's the exact book and the exact passage you just cited, that where Origen talks about the number of Christians, and he doesn't. He talks about the faith and prayer and stuff like that. He does not talk about. I think it's maybe because it talks about the two of us. He's talking about. He says that if two of us shall be on earth touching anything else, that is not an actual number. That he's just talking about the passage in Scripture where Jesus talks about if two or more come in your name, so there shall I be also.
And Carrier goes on to say any conclusion with evidential support, even if we start with 5,000 Christians in the year 40 AD, must fit the projections for the 3rd and 4th century. And we use the evidence we have. We never approached 1% of the population by 100 AD. So to put it in another perspective, as Fitzgerald goes on, some weird beard example of a cult, spiritualism in the 19th century, was a cult that consisted of seances and ectoplasm. It gained 3 million followers. 3 million followers in the United States in just 10 years in the 19th century. This weird-ass cult. 3 million followers. By comparison to Christianity, nearly 200 years to come anywhere close, near close.
But wait a minute, you just said that you can't make any blanket assertions about how many Christians there was in the 1st and 2nd century. So how do you know what the number was? Or in the 3rd century? You've not provided evidence for that.
And then by the time that Christianity took hold, only because of the turmoil in Rome itself, How many times have we heard testimonies from people, Christians, that their life was a mess until they found Jesus? No different in Christianity with the Roman Empire. Fitzgerald goes on to say the 3rd century was a time of chaos throughout the Roman world, dominated by near perpetual civil war, economic crisis, political crisis. It all began with the assassination of a young emperor Severus, and it kicked off decades of continuous civil war and short-lived emperors. I think when Constantine took over, there were actually 3 different emperors, and he consolidated everything. The frontiers were neglected, barbarians from all sides attacked repeatedly, and it was no longer safe to even travel. The merchants couldn't travel. Financial establishments were crippled because of this vast network collapsing because of all the civil war and crime and all. By 258 AD, the empire crumbled into 3 warring states, and there were a succession of soldier emperors, gradually succeeded briefly in reuniting the empire and securing the borders in 274. But in 284, Diocletian, who was an emperor, was forced to split the empire in half. And one note, Diocletian was one of the few emperors that actually went after Christians. Nero was the other one. For the most part, they left them alone. In 300 years from the inception of Christianity till Constantine codified it, there were only about 30 years where Christians were prosecuted more than persecuted for various things. It was on a local level.
No, it wasn't on a local level. It was at a much larger level. And Diocletian and Nero and a couple of other emperors weren't very happy with Christianity. And a couple of other countries that they were in as well, because they just weren't just in Jerusalem role, as we discussed before.
Rome's destruction was Christianity's salvation. Traits that had made Christianity so uninviting to the Roman elite finally turned around and became inviting to people that were losing their riches, losing everything. Then he grabbed Christianity, and Christianity adapted to it because it flourished with the collapse. And this goes to say, comports quite perfectly with Darrell Ray's book, The God Virus, where in one of the chapters, Darrell Ray talks about how religion itself, the virus, will mutate, adapt, change, and cling to a government, a country, to survive. So it comports perfectly with that.
Well, Darrell Ray's wrong, because Christianity was already growing and the fact is that Constantine saw that particular ship coming, and basically thought, right, I can unify the country under the banner of Christianity, and he actually used the labyrinth symbol in that as one of the ways to do that. Darrell Ray's full of shit. I'm sorry, Darrell Ray, David Fitzgerald, Richard Carrier, these are the bottom feeders of the atheist intellectual movement here. The people who shouldn't really be taken serious by anybody in the atheist community or movement or whatever you want to call it. They're foolish people.
And just some things now for me to put this in a proper perspective as far as religion goes and the detrimental effect it has. It's no secret that the most religious countries in the world are the most economically disadvantaged, the most oppressed. South American countries owned by the Catholic Church, Muslim countries in the Middle East owned by radical Islamists, fundamentalist Islam.
Where are you getting these economics from? The most rich country in the world is a Christian country. It's the United States. Is not constitutionally Christian, but it is mostly Christian. Dubai is a very rich country. Iran is Saudi Arabia is a very rich country. They're both Muslim. Last time I looked, they both have oil mineral wealth. So that sort of shoots you in your foot there. And South America being owned under the Catholic Church, what the fuck are you talking about? They're Catholic, yes, but they're not owned by the church. Dear God. You're one of these people who thinks that the Vatican owns the world, aren't you? I know it. I know you're a conspiracy theorist under that.
But looking at our own country, I did this check, and I'm going to have the 2 sources on the description box. Out of the 10 most religious states in the United States, out of the 50, the 10 most religious, 7 of them are in Dixie. and they're the poorest. There would have been an eighth one, North Carolina. It just missed at the bottom 10 by 1 point. It's 39th out of 50. Mississippi is the most religious, and it's the poorest. 61% of the people are religious, and it's 50th as far as economic, as far as economics go in general. Now Utah isn't in there. It's 14th out of 50. Of course, you got those rich Mormons. Georgia, surprisingly, is not economically disadvantaged like the other states I mentioned. It's 17th on the list out of 50, but that's because it's very pro-business, hence anti-union, anti-labor, and it has, among other industries, their aerospace, defense contractors, and auto industries. Without those, it would be in the bottom 10. But 7 of the poorest states are down south and are the most religious states. Did I say anything else?
No, you just did an argument for false equivalency. I don't think we need anything else. There is no correlation between somebody's religion and how poor or rich they're going to be. Or how intelligent and smart you are. Doesn't have any correlation either. Those are arguments made by people who are stupid enough to think that those sort of things matter. People are poor for numerous things, and blaming it on their religious belief or lack of religious belief has nothing to do with it. And this is my problem with that I have with you, Raoul, is that you seem to want to have simple reactions to things that are complex problems. Somebody's economically future is not dependent upon their religious beliefs. You have to prove that's the case. You can't prove that because it's not the case. That's just it. Okay, now throughout this video, I've proven you wrong again, but you won't accept that because you can't accept that. I suppose I've got to do the next one of these, you do. But for the time, ciao, people.